Welcome back to Classy and Sassy. I'm your host, Erica Regina. You know, every now and again, I have one of those weeks where I don't necessarily have one huge topic that I want to dive into, but I have a lot of things that have been living rent-free in my head, and this is one of those weeks. Reality television has, of course, taken over my evenings, especially since I decided to write recaps. I'm reading two completely different books that have me thinking for completely different reasons. And somewhere in the middle of all that, I've started asking myself a question that I honestly think applies to a lot more than just celebrities or reality TV contestants. You know, how much do we actually let people grow? I'm not talking just, the famous people, the celebrities, all of us. Because if there's one thing I've noticed lately, is that we're real quick to tell people they should learn from their mistakes. But we're not very good at accepting that maybe they actually have. So we're going to get into all of that today. We're going to talk about Love Island, because movie night has officially arrived, and nobody warned me just how much this show was going to become a commitment. I want to tell you what I'm reading because, of course, thrillers and memoirs are always, they're my thing. And they're my favorite genres. If you're a thriller fan like I am, I may even have one to add to your list. And before we're done, I want to talk about something I've been noticing in everyday life. Have we become so comfortable being uncomfortable that we don't even recognize it anymore? So grab your coffee, your tea, or your wine, and let's talk. Now, let's talk about Love Island. Movie night has officially happened. If you're not familiar, it basically means clips of things that the other contestants may not be aware of. So secrets are out, people are angry, trust has been broken, and this is only part one. Movie night is in two parts this time. Everybody has an opinion. And honestly, this might be my favorite part of the season. Not because people are getting hurt, don't get me wrong, but because this is where reality starts replacing the fantasy. Up until this point, everybody can tell themselves whatever story they want. I didn't really do anything. It wasn't all that serious. I was just exploring. Then movie night comes along and politely says, actually, let's roll the footage. And suddenly, there are no places left to hide. One thing I always found interesting is how differently people react when you confront them with the proof. And some people immediately apologize, some double down. But of course, there are always the people who just immediately become defensive. They try to explain away what everybody literally just watched. And every time, you get reminded that accountability is uncomfortable for some people. Nobody enjoys seeing the worst version of themselves playing on a giant screen. But let's talk about the audience. Because if the contestants are having arguments inside the villa, the viewers are having them online. I find myself occasionally scrolling through comments because I'm genuinely curious about what everyone else thought. And let me tell you, people are passionate about whose side they're on. Some people are absolutely convinced that one person is the victim, that other people think is the problem. Then somebody else notices a facial expression that apparently changes the entire conversation. I don't know how some of these viewers notice half the things they notice, but they catch things that I'm sure production didn't mean for them to catch. There are entire TikTok accounts dedicated to breaking down eye contact, body language, background conversations they caught, and who looked at who for half a second too long. It's honestly impressive. And then I started thinking about something. What happens after this? Because eventually the season ends. Everybody goes home. Life goes back to normal. Except, does it? Imagine doing something like this, then getting your phone back after weeks. Millions of people have been watching you. Millions of people have formed opinions about your character. Some of them may love you, but some of them can't stand you. And they may have even decided they know exactly who you are based on a very heavily edited television show. That's a lot to carry. You still got to go to work, see your family, run errands, try to date, build a career, live a normal life. Except now, complete strangers think they know you. And here's something I've wondered ever since I started watching these types of shows. Do these contestants actually tell their families not to watch? Seriously, is there a family group text that says, Mom, Dad, Grandma, maybe you should sit this season out? Because there are definitely some scenes where you find yourself thinking there's absolutely no amount of money that would make me comfortable knowing my entire family is watching this. Now, maybe that's my age, maybe I'm just old, but I can't imagine my parents sitting at home watching me make some of these decisions. And then there's the physical side of it. I understand it's the environment. I understand they're together 24 hours a day, and emotions move faster in the villa than they do in real life. But I cannot wrap my mind around kissing multiple people you've known for like 5 minutes. Maybe I'm just built differently. I might want to know your middle name or your last name, for heaven. Maybe where you're from. Do you have allergies? Let's start there. Then maybe we can talk. I've also noticed that sometimes contestants leave a reality show as fan favorites. People love them, they're funny, they're relatable, everybody roots for them. And then they do other things and public opinion changes. Not necessarily because they're a different person. It's just that sometimes maybe we've seen too much of you. Sometimes protecting the reputation you've built may be smarter than continuing. Which actually brings me to something that's much bigger than reality television. Those contestants aren't the only people discovering that the internet has a very long memory. One thing Love Island has really made me think about is how quickly the internet decides who somebody is. And I don't mean just on the show. On almost every reality show, somebody has one bad episode and suddenly they're a terrible person. Another contestant may have a really good episode and suddenly they're everyone's favorite. It's amazing how quickly public opinion shifts. And before anyone thinks I'm defending any bad behavior, I'm not. There are absolutely things people should be held accountable for. Racism, abuse, violence. Those aren't things that should, simply be brushed aside. It's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about everything else, that gray area. Because every season, somebody's old tweets are dug up, somebody's Facebook posts from 10, 15 years ago suddenly become headline news, and X decides now is the perfect time to post screenshots. Former friends or even people who don't really know you start telling stories about you online. People who have not spoken to you in years suddenly remember every terrible thing you've ever done. Part of me understands it, but part of me also wonders, at what point do we allow people to become different? Because I hope that I am not the exact person I was at, say, 21 or 25. Because honestly, if I am, that's a problem. Life is supposed to change us. Experience changes us. Reading, heartbreak, success, failure definitely changes us. So shouldn't we expect people to grow? Or do we only believe in personal growth if it's happening to us? Because here's the thing. The internet doesn't really care if you've changed or not. The internet cares that somebody found receipts of something you did. And sometimes I think we've confused accountability with performance. These aren't necessarily the same thing. Can someone genuinely apologize and learn and become better? Or once you've made a mistake online, is it simply your identity forever? I don't know the answer. I'm genuinely asking. Because I think one of the biggest questions our generation has yet to figure out, previous generations got to make our mistakes privately. But now that's not an option. Everything lives somewhere. Everyone has a screenshot or has an archive. Sometimes I wonder what today's teenagers are going to experience 20 years from now. Imagine every awkward opinion you had at 16 saved forever. It sounds exhausting. Then again, maybe knowing that people think a little harder before they post, maybe that's not entirely a bad thing either. See, this is why I find the conversation so interesting. I don't think there's a simple answer. I think there has to be room for accountability, but I also think there has to be room for growth. Otherwise, what's the point? If you're not allowed to become different, why would you try? And maybe that's the bigger takeaway from watching shows like this. These contestants aren't just trying to figure out a relationship. They're trying to figure out while they are in front of millions of people watching them. I wouldn't envy that at all, not even a little bit. Speaking of understanding people, I think that's one of the reasons memoirs have become one of my favorite genres. If you had asked me 10 or 15 years ago what I like to read, they definitely would not have made the list. I only wanted thrillers and suspense and mystery, something that kept me guessing. And don't get me wrong, I still absolutely love a good thriller. We'll get to that in a minute. But somewhere along the way, I also found myself getting very interested in other people's stories. Not the polished version or the version that gets turned into a headline, the real version. Now, maybe that's because I'm getting older and life has a way of humbling you. Or maybe it's because after all these years, you realize every single person you meet has lived an entire life before you ever cross paths with them. Everybody has chapters you know nothing about. And that's why these books fascinate me. You can read 20 news articles about someone and think you know exactly who they are. Then you pick up their book and realize maybe you didn't know them at all. Sometimes I can finish one and admire that person so much more than I did before. Of course, other times, not so much. But I almost always walk away with a better understanding of who they became, why they became, and honestly, isn't that what we're all trying to do? Understand each other a little better? Now, right now I'm getting ready to start I Choose Me by Jenny Garth. I grew up watching Beverly Hills 90210 like a lot of people did. So, of course, I know her as Kelly Taylor. But what interests me is not revisiting the television show. I'm interested in hearing how someone reflects on decades of life, success, marriage, divorce, motherhood, aging, and figuring out who they are when the cameras are not rolling anymore. Because that's the part we rarely get to see. We see their careers and magazine covers. We see their lovely content on Instagram. We see them on red carpets. We don't usually see the quiet moments where someone has to rebuild their confidence or completely reinvent themselves. And honestly, those are the stories I find the most inspiring. Not because the people are celebrities, because they're human. The details may be different than ours, but the emotions usually aren't. We've all had to start over somewhere. We've all questioned ourselves or looked in the mirror at some point and wondered, who am I now? That's why these books resonate with me. They remind me that nobody has life completely figured out. Not even the people we assume do. Now, of course, after spending time in someone else's life, I do need a complete escape. And that's where my thrillers come in. My next thriller is going to be It Should Have Been You by Andrea Mara. Now, I literally just picked this one up, so this is definitely not a review. But if you listened to the podcast for any amount of time, you already know that I'm a psychological thriller girl. It's my comfort genre. I know that sounds strange. You know, most people may relax with romantic comedies or they may unwind with a good Hallmark movie. Apparently, I unwind about reading about missing people, murder investigations, family secrets, and plot twists. I'm not really sure what that says about me. And at this point, I'm choosing not to ask. One thing I appreciate about Andrea's writing is how quickly she pulls you into a story. Because I don't need 50 pages describing the wallpaper. Give me something suspicious by page 10, make me question everybody by chapter 3, and have me convinced I've solved the mystery halfway through the book so that you can completely embarrass me and prove I'm wrong. That's my kind of reading experience. And maybe that's another reason I love thrillers. They remind you not to jump to conclusions. Every time I think I've figured everything out, another twist comes along. And maybe real life is like that too. We become so convinced we know someone's story, then one piece of information changes everything. Which brings me back to television, of course. How many times have we completely changed our opinion of someone after one new episode? A new clip, a new conversation, or some secret that finally comes to light. Maybe that's why I enjoy reading memoirs and thrillers so much. One teaches you there are always more layers to a person than you realized. The other reminds you there are always more twists than you expected. Either way, it's a good reminder not to decide you've got everything figured out so quickly. One last thing I want to talk about before we wrap up. Have you ever noticed how easy it is to get comfortable being uncomfortable? I know, that sounds backwards, but hear me out. There are people who complain about the same job every single Monday morning, or the same relationship, friendship, financial situation, or the same habits year after year. And eventually, that discomfort becomes familiar. And familiar has a funny way of convincing us it's safer than change. I've caught myself doing it too. Maybe not with one huge thing, but with little things that slowly become your normal. You know, putting off working out and saying, I'll start next week. Letting your reading goals slide because life has been busy. Saying yes to one more thing because, well, what's one more thing? Because before you know it, those decisions become your lifestyle. And that's why I think it's so important to check in with yourself every once in a while. I don't mean check in and criticize yourself or beat yourself up. I just want you to ask a few honest questions. Am I actually happy, or have I just gotten used to being unhappy? Am I growing or just maintaining what's comfortable? Is this still the life I want, or simply the life I've gotten used to? Those are not easy questions. Honestly, they're a little uncomfortable, and maybe that's the point. Because growth usually starts with a little discomfort, not the dramatic, life-imploding kind, the quiet kind. The kind that whispers, you know this isn't working anymore. Maybe it's your health, your career, or a friendship that's become very one-sided. A routine that made sense 5 years ago, but does not fit the person you've become today. Whatever it is, you don't have to wake up tomorrow and completely reinvent your life. Sometimes one small change is enough to start moving in a different direction. Read one chapter of a book. Take one walk. Heck, have one difficult conversation. Apply for one different job. Say no to one thing that is draining you. Progress doesn't always show up looking dramatic. Sometimes it looks incredibly ordinary. One decision, repeated consistently, And maybe that's what I'm reminding myself of as much as I'm reminding you. Because we're all figuring this out. I'm still working on balancing work with the things that fill my own cup. I'm still trying to stay on top of my reading goals. I'm still learning when to let something go and when to keep fighting for it. None of this is something that any of us has completely figured out. And honestly, I think that's okay. That's why I love these conversations. We don't have to pretend we've mastered life. We can be honest about where we are. So before I let you go, I'd love to know what you're reading right now. And are you watching things like Love Island? Do you think movie night reveals why people do the things they do and who they really are? Or does it simply just throw gasoline on a fire that was already burning? What's one area of your life where you've realized you've gotten a little too comfortable being uncomfortable? Come find me on social media and let me know. Those conversations are honestly one of my favorite parts of doing this podcast. And if you'd like even more conversations like this, along with book recommendations, travel, inspiration, and a little behind the scenes look at everything else I'm working on, make sure you subscribe to my newsletter. I'd love to have you there. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with me. Take care of yourselves, be kind to one another, and I'll see you next week.